It's 1:31, so we might kick off, and I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope you can see presentation on the screen already. As I've already said, we are recording, yeah, you are welcome to ask questions. We'll answer those at the end of all of our presentations, but please use the chat function if you've got questions that you think of as the presenters are going through, and that way we can come back to those later. So I'd like to begin by introducing myself. My name is Jennifer Hemer. I manage the Water and Marine Program at NRM South. The format of our webinar today is that I'm going to give an overview of our project, Blue Carbon Ecosystem Restoration at Pitt Water-Orielton Lagoon, and then also get presentations from our collaborators at the University of Tasmania, so Dr. Vishnu Prahalad, and Blue Conservation Services, that's Dr. Matt Cameron. So we'll have presentations from them as well, and that will give you an idea of how we've managed and monitored this project and created environmental economic accounts associated with it. And as I said, please add your questions along the way. And just first of all, I'd just like to introduce the organisation that I'm working for at NRM South. We are a not-for-profit or for-purpose organisation working in southern Tasmania, and we are a regional delivery partner to the Australian Government as one of 54 natural resource management organisations across Australia. I would also like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of Lutruwita, Tasmania, the Tasmanian Aboriginal people, and acknowledge their continued survival and connection with their land, sea and sky country that spans millennia. We acknowledge the many nations of Tasmanian Aboriginal people, past and present, as the traditional and ongoing owners of their respective countries within Lutruwita and the islands. And today I'm sitting on Muanina country. And we pay our respect to those who have passed and acknowledge today's Aboriginal people who are custodians of this land. So just to get started, I'd like to give you a little introduction to saltmarsh, which is what we've been working on these past 4 years now in this restoration project. So the NRM South strategy, which takes us through to 2030, prioritises Ramsar wetlands and temperate saltmarsh ecological communities within the southern Tasmania area. So why would we want to restore saltmarsh? Well, it's really important fish nursery habitat. It's highly biodiverse. It contributes organic material to estuaries, which then contribute to the broader seascape productivity. It's important in emissions reduction. It sequesters carbon in both sediments and in vegetation, and it might offer coastal resilience against floods and sea level rise. So it's a priority for NRM South. The project that we're going to introduce you to today wouldn't happen without our project partners, and our partners are at the heart of everything that NRM South does and the way we deliver our projects. So when we plan a project, we aim to collaborate with researchers and other organisations to achieve the best possible outcomes for environmental restoration and to contribute to ongoing science and understanding of environmental processes. So for this particular project, we collaborated with the Australian Government, who funded the project, first of all through a fish habitat restoration program grant, and then moving into a blue carbon ecosystem restoration grant. We also worked closely with the University of Tasmania, Blue Conservation Services, and the owners of Richmond Park, which is the property that we're focusing on today. So I'd like to introduce you to here in the photo. This is Will, who is the farmer that we've been working with through this project. So where are we? Our project occurred out in the Pitt Water-Orielton Lagoon Ramsar site down in southeast Tasmania. You can see it, broadly here on the map, and then focusing in, we can look at we're at the bottom of the Coal River Valley, and you can see that red line identifies the area that we've been working in. So Pitt Water-Orielton Lagoon is a Ramsar listed wetland of international significance. And when we undertook this project, first of all, to restore fish habitat and then to restore blue carbon ecosystems, we were looking for areas where levees had been created to create more pasture. And where there's a levee, there's a clear restoration action. So the area that we've been restoring is the single largest area of saltmarsh in Tasmania that we could identify that has been degraded due to a loss of hydrological flow, so tidal flow to the area. This particular area represents a 65 hectare landscape scale restoration opportunity, and the criteria that we used in deciding to work in this location was around looking at the extent and quality of the salt marsh that we could influence, the landholder willingness to work with us, the connectivity of the site to other wetland areas, and our ability to actually do the services, do the things on the ground that we wanted to do. So just looking here, this is an aerial shot from this map when we were planning the project. What we wanted to achieve was to understand the benefits of salt marsh restoration, wetland restoration at the landscape scale, and also understand the co-benefits of blue carbon ecosystem restoration for climate and biodiversity and livelihoods. So the types of works that we've undertaken at this site, you can see the red line on the map, that's the levee that we have removed to restore the natural tidal hydrology to this area. We've also put up fences to exclude livestock, undertaken weed removal, undertaken revegetation out here to provide a supportive microclimate and improve habitat around the wetland. We've undertaken some erosion control, particularly of the access areas. And along the way, we've done our best to try and build the capacity of lots of different natural resource managers and landowners to undertake similar types of works in the future. I'm going to go through just a series of aerial images just to show you, and I know Vishnu is going to talk to these a little bit more as well, but here's what the area looked like in around 1966, we estimate. And you can see an open tidal channel between the Coal River and the Richmond Park flood. Richmond Park's the name of the property, the floodplain there. So looking at this site again in 2021, you can see on the outside there at the Coal River, there's a highly functioning salt marsh wetland, but very degraded on the inside of that levee. Just looking at it from the land, this is before we restored it in early 2023. You can look across the levee to see where it's preventing the tidal flow into the stranded area. But what you can also see here is that there's a pipe beneath the levee that had a cap on it to prevent the tide coming in. At some point that's been removed, and what's happened is you can see there's water coming into the area that we want to restore, but it's getting stuck there. It's ponded, it can't get back out again. And that became quite an interesting challenge to resolve as we managed this project too, because it put extra pressure on the levee and caused areas of high erosion. You can see some of the weeds on the hillside that we have removed and revegetated as well. Again, looking from above, you can see the bund or levee that we were aiming to remove. And what you can see here too, if you're looking at, is a bit of a breach forming over time because of the water that's coming into the degraded area and can't get out again. We also saw scours beginning to form in the levee as well, which were undermining the integrity of the wetland area too. And just noting here, that's a really healthy salt marsh on the outside and a really degraded area on the inside. So we started seeing these breaches occur, seeing build-up of high sort of algae environments, quite eutrophic on the inside. That's what we're aiming to fix. And then we did have a breach, and that created some significant, things that we had to adapt to in how we managed the project. We're getting a lot of scouring, erosion, and this white water occurring, and salt marsh wetland doesn't want white water, it wants nice gentle tidal movement. So that created some challenges for us along the way. But we did get the levee out, and you can see here, this is May last year, excuse me. We've got the levee out in April, and you can see the open channel forming again and the revegetation that we've done. The soil that was removed from that levee was put up on this hill slope here and revegetated to stabilise it. Just looking again from the sky before we restored it, that restricted channel with the breach in it, and then the open channel afterwards. So prior to the levee coming out, we're seeing this sort of high algae environment, and this vegetation, salt marsh, is in pretty poor condition, covered in that algae. But once the breach occurred, we were able to see some regeneration, which indicated to us that what we were going to undertake in removing the levee was going to work. And here we are this year in January, some photos sent to us from Will, the landholder. Very, very high tides and the area able to absorb those because the water can move around probably as it should do. To hit some more, I'm just looking at it from the top end as well. So what does it undertake? What does it matter? What does it mean to manage a project like this? Our role in this project has been very much about stakeholder and relationship management and engagement. So working with the landholder and all of the other people who are involved in delivering this kind of project and sharing our outcomes. We've also undertaken all the landscape and logistical planning and formed agreements with different organisations and the landholders to get the work done. We've been contract managers, contracting out monitoring, the on-ground actions that I talked about, and we've participated in that monitoring too. But importantly, with a project like this, our permit management and reporting has been significant, and I'll talk you through that in just a moment. And over time, we've sort of participated in the ongoing maintenance of the work that we've done. So to actually get a project like this off the ground, what do you need? This site that we've been working at is a really important site for Aboriginal heritage. So we've worked closely with Aboriginal Heritage Tasmania through permits and the Aboriginal community to ensure that the restoration works that we've undertaken have met the desires of the Aboriginal community. And we've been able to record significant Aboriginal cultural heritage on the site. So we've done that through permit. We've needed permits from the Clarence City Council, which is where this area is. They're effectively development permits. There's not restoration permits that we can get to undertake this kind of work. So we've had to present this as a development permit. And the council have always referred this project, or referred the right of this project to the EPA should it be needed. So we haven't needed a permit from the EPA, but we've always had conversations with the EPA about what we're doing. We've also had to investigate water resource permits as well, because a levee might constitute a dam. So because it's tidal, it doesn't constitute a dam, but it's another permit that we had to explore to get this work done. So that takes up a significant amount of our time, just in making sure that we are doing all the checks and balances to undertake a big restoration project of this scale. And before I finish up, I just wanted to take you through a little bit of what the restoration looked like. So this is just a video. We had a GoPro set up during the actual works. So what you'll see here is the excavator coming in, and I can tell you it's there's not too many excavator operators who really want to put their machines in salt water, so we're very grateful to the excavator operator who undertook this work. We're actually having to fill in here the breach that occurred, put in a culvert to allow the tide to keep moving through and not wash everything away. Move the excavator along, scrape off the levee and deposit all the soil up on that hill slope, and then gradually work backwards to remove the levee. I did mention the permits, but also within this, we've needed to consider things like acid sulfate soils and management plans for that. So that yellow line that you can see there, that's actually sort of silk curtains preventing anything from moving around too much. So I'll just stop that one and allow some time for my co-presenters. But yeah, would sincerely like to thank DQ for their funding of this project and supporting us on the way through. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Vishnu. And as I said, as we go along, if you have any questions, please pop those in the chat and we'll come back to those at the end. Over to you, Vishnu.
Thank you, Jen. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, and did you want me to share my screen, or?
If you could, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, all right. I'll set that up in 1 second.
Yep.
Thank you for the introduction and the visuals, Jen. That makes my job a little bit easier, hopefully. And I'll just share my screen now. Can see my slides?
Yep, go for it.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So thanks for the invitation to join this presentation. This is a really exciting project for us, and I'll tell you why in a minute in many different ways, but particularly as a scientist, saltmarsh enthusiast, it's been really exciting for me to be able to do this work and do it with so many collaborators who I've listed there. I'll particularly probably mention Victor Shelamov, Agustina Barros, and Violet Harrison-Day, who've been contributing to different aspects of this project, but also a whole host of other people, including quite a few volunteers who've been really helpful for us to do the actual work on the ground. And also acknowledging the great support from NRM South, Grace, previously Jen Hammer, all the way through, and also other staff who sort of come in recently. We've also had collaborations from the mainland, Nathan Walton from JCU, Troy Gaston from New South Wales, and obviously a key contributor to this project in bringing this together, as you'll hear from Matt after me, is Blue Carbon or Blue Conservation Services. So thank you to you all. So just a bit of a science context, because Jen's already covered this, I'll be quick. I guess the main focus for us is the levee bank, which, as you can see here, which was the subject of the restoration here. And as Jen mentioned, this is the largest hydrological restoration of salt marsh in the state, one of the largest areas of salt marsh. And also a really nice one, because we just got this large floodplain sitting behind effectively a short length of this levee. So it's a straightforward project in just removing the levee. Another component of this project was obviously in excluding the sheep, which were accessing the site. So there's a lot of work involved in the perimeter fencing, which roughly you can see the outline of here. To give you an indication of the impact of sheep, along with hydrological restrictions on this site, you can see here, is absolutely dead in terms of any life. What you would expect to see is like this color here, which is a natural salt marsh, but on the inside, there's just no life at all. And also sheep hooves, whatever salt marsh might eventually come up here and there, it's been completely trampled over and grazed by sheep. So it's just this double whammy in this site, which required restoration, both in terms of hydrological restoration, levee removal, but also the fencing to exclude the sheep. Just quickly, in terms of, again, reiterating what Jen was saying here, the levee's been on this site on and off. We did an aerial photo time series analysis from the 1940s. You could see in the 1940s, the levee was there, and then it was taken out, and it was there, and it's taken out. So this is a nice photo from the 1960s, which actually shows a really nice expanse of salt marsh on the inside, which is exactly what we are expecting post this restoration. And as we can trace through these photographs over the last 50, 60 years, we could see that this is coloring up reasonably quickly, like in the time frame of 5 to 10 years, so which is encouraging in the sense that, because we've just done the restoration now, this is the breach in 2023, and this is the full restoration in 2024. In 10 years' time, we should be able to see this coloring up nicely and the salt marsh coming back. And I've got a couple of photos to indicate how that might happen. So I said this is a really exciting project because of all the funding we've received. We've been able to basically study all of this. So I would have liked an hour to go through all of this, but in the interest of time, I'm only going to focus on 2 of these studies that are particularly exciting and illustrative of the benefits of salt marsh restoration. But if you are interested, do please reach out to me. We've got 10 papers in the works, and that's all documenting the restoration before and after, and in turn, the benefits of restoration. So the first one, and the one that really illustrates the benefits of restoration, because it's hydrological restoration, is how the hydrology itself has been restored, but also in terms of how that's bringing back the fish communities, because with the water come in the fish and also crabs and shrimp and so on. So I've got a time-lapse video here that gives you a sense of what we did on the ground, which is fishing. You can see the fyke net there that's been set up, the tide's coming in. We're going back and checking the height of the highest point in the high tide. So we've got that on record. So we can relate water depth to fish diversity and density. And there it is, we're going and collecting the fish, coming back next day and actually see Molly and Lydia actually doing some cores, and we're looking at metals in those cores, which is another component of the study. I won't have time to cover today, but again, if you want that information, I can make that available. So this is us coming back in the next tide, and rinse and repeat. So you could see that we've been doing this in winter in 2022, and then in 2023, and then in 2024, which is the after. So we've got this full series of data. And I'll share some results here. So I mentioned that this has been a project in hydrological restoration. This is graphs put together by Karen Palmer. And you can see here that before the levee was breached or fully removed, you could see the hydrology is I guess, all over the place. In a way, it's a bit like, heartbeat, right? So you can see the tides almost like the beating of the heart every 2 times a day. You can see the tides going in and out. But this is not representative of that, just because of the levee here. So you can see that this is the incoming tide. Sometimes it sort of spills over, and the water's then sitting there for extended periods of time. And that is also killing the salt marsh plants. So you get this sort of dual effect. The salt marsh plants are either killed by too much water or too little water. It's a bit like watering our tomato plants, right? So you've got to have the right watering in, otherwise you kill your plants either way with too much or too little watering. And that's what we're seeing here, either too little or too much watering, which is killing off the plants. And then for extended periods of time, it's just sitting there dry, even though the high tide's sitting on the outside. And then you can see, this is what I mean by the heartbeat, right? So you can see this, beautifully aligned even after the breach. You can see a little bit of a lag because of the restricted entry into the floodplain, but we've got data from more recent hydrological monitoring where that lapse is now gone. So you get this beautiful alignment of high tide in Hobart and then high tide on site with some time lapse in terms of when it occurs. And that's illustrative of the hydrological restoration that's happened there. And you can see that also playing out in terms of the extent modeling. So we've done some extent modeling, again, from Karen, where you can see the water's going in. And this, to make it easy in terms of communication, this equates to up to 57 Olympic-sized swimming pools in the average fortnightly spring tide. And apart from restoring natural hydrological processes, in a small system like Pitt Water, you can imagine what this is doing in relieving erosional strain on other parts of the lagoon. So this is the multiple ecosystem services that we are benefiting from the restoration of the salt marsh here. I mentioned fish, and that these are some photos from our fish work. There's a lot of fish, lots of different types. Over 10, 15 species of fish. The more recent surveys, we're still analyzing data. We're still analyzing the data. So we'll have some really good findings in terms of the response. There's also been a lot of crabs and a lot of shrimp, as you can see there. There's probably 500 shrimp just in that one little tray there. And that's all illustrative of the biodiversity and the richness of this ecosystem and what's coming through with the water in this habitat. So just quickly, in terms of results, what you can see is, I'll play this as well, so you can see the flounder here and the mullet. So we're getting a lot of yellow eye mullets, we're getting greenback flounders, we're getting hardy heads, gobies, and so on. So when the levee was in place, although there was a little pipe, and the little pipe was not big enough for the big fish to go in. When the levee was removed, now we're starting to see a lot of big fish. That's the one we caught recently, a large mullet that are coming on the inside. We spotted maybe gummy or school sharks, we're not sure, 1/2 meter size, that are now found inside the floodplain. So we know Pitt Water is a shark nursery. So now we've added about 50, 60 hectares to the shark nursery habitat. This translates really good outcomes in terms of recreational and commercial fisheries. So you can see flounders, which are important for recreational commercial fishes. Now we've created large areas, hectares of flounder habitat in this project, as you can see from our data. So I mentioned that there's quite a few studies in the works here, but I've only got time to go through a few. So this is the second one. Very quickly, we've been doing some veg monitoring here. And again, as with fish monitoring, we've done that three times now. And the takeaway from this is that the recovery is already evident. And you can see that here in these two pictures, before and after. This is both in 2022, 2023. There's hardly any life there. It was just a cesspool with all the sheep urine and excrement and so on. But right now, the system is slowly cleaning itself. We have not done any salt marsh planting as such, but the plant seeds are there and they're starting to come back. You can already see about 20% of recovery that's happened in this particular area. And you can see what I mean, right? So in sort of 5-10 years time, this will then slowly expand to occupy the full quadrat and color up the area if you're looking at it from the aerial photographs and satellite imagery and so on. So I did say this is an exciting project because as a scientist, as a salt marsh enthusiast, it's sort of given us opportunities to do lots of different things. And one of that is to be able to look at birds and mammals, which is not something that we generally have done in salt marshes. So we had the ability to support a PhD student, Alejandra, from biological sciences, working with Barry Brook and Jesse Butel. So she's been doing bird surveys in Richmond, but also to get a sense of what we're finding in Richmond, how to contextualize that. We picked two other sites, as you can see. This is TLC's new reserve in Sloping, Maine, and this is Marchfield Marsh in Marion Bay. So this is sort of comparable sites. So we're doing bird surveys and mammal surveys across these three sites, so we can then contextualize what we're finding in Richmond and how that's been benefiting from restoration. And already we're seeing some changes in bird communities. Just being on the site, you can now see a lot of terns inside the floodplain, because obviously the fish are coming in, and that means the terns are all in there fishing. So likewise, you'll see swans and grebes and egrets, a lot more water birds coming in and using that floodplain area, which has been restored. Well, I'll stop there, but like I said, there's a lot more to say, and we're in the process of analyzing the data. We'll be submitting manuscripts in the next 3, 4, 5 months. So hopefully this will all be in the public domain and thus supporting more salt marsh conservation projects in the future, because the benefits are now demonstrated and are publicly available in peer-reviewed scientific journals. Thank you.
Thanks, Vishnu. And as Vishnu said, if anyone would like to get access to those papers when they're published, then contact him directly, or you're welcome to contact NRM South too. So next I'd like to introduce Dr. Matt Cameron, who works with Blue Conservation Services, and he's going to talk us through how they've been developing environmental economic accounts associated with this project and what they're seeing through their monitoring too. So Matt, are you right to share your screen, or do you need to?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. I'll do
Great.
that now.
Thank you. And do everyone please feel free to pop any questions that you have in the chat. We'll come to those before we finish up today.
Is everyone seeing my screen okay? Hopefully.
You good, Matt? Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I'd like to start off with a thank you to Jen and NRM South for involving us and inviting us along to this webinar. It's a pleasure to be here. Just to introduce myself, as Jen already has said, my name is Dr. Matthew Cameron. I'm the Principal Ecologist and Co-Director at Blue Conservation Services. We're a small independent Tasmanian-based consultancy. We specialise in marine and coastal habitat restoration, biodiversity, natural capital and climate adaptation projects. We're very much collaborative with multiple organisations around Australia, and our aim is essentially to bridge the gap between scientific knowledge and restoration and conservation practice. We work around Australia, Tasmania, obviously New Zealand and beyond. Just to give you some background on our components of the project, we were contracted by DQ to deliver the environmental, economic and accounting component of of the wider project. We're funded under the Blue Carbon Conservation Restoration and Accounting Programme. We're working collaboratively with our project partners at NRM South, with Vishnu and other experts at UTAS, and natural capital specialists at RMIT. It's a 2-year project which has been running and continuously, and will culminate in June of this year. And essentially, we were brought on to coordinate the accounting of changes in ecosystem condition, biodiversity, and the associated ecosystem services. I'll give you a very brief overview of what environmental economic accounting is. It's quite complex, and apologies to those experts in the meeting that I'm hopefully not insulting with my explanation here. But essentially, it integrates environmental and ecological data into economic statistics that track changes in environmental asset condition over time. This gives us an understanding of how these assets contribute to and are valued as ecosystem services. And it essentially puts a number on nature that allow environmental managers to make decisions based upon. This project applies the UN System for Environmental Economic Accounting, or SEEA. It's an official international framework for natural capital accounting. It provides a common system for organising and presenting statistics in their relationship with the economy. And the advantage of it is that it allows replication and comparability over vast scales, both spatial and temporal, and the results of which are easily integrated into national accounting frameworks. The actual process of developing accounts is quite complex. This schematic gives you a very brief and broad overview of the approach. Essentially, you identify your relevant assets to do with your project, and you measure the extent of those assets based on however you wish to classify them. You then identify metrics that indicate the ecosystem health of or condition of those assets, and then use those to define service metrics, and ultimately identify a beneficiary and the value to those beneficiaries. I won't spend any time really on the describing the project, because Jen and Vishnu have done such a great job, other than to just reiterate that the full tidal reintroduction was achieved in April of last year. The first component of developing the accounts is to identify the assets that you believe are important. And in this instance, we use field survey data of vegetation, saltmarsh vegetation across the site to then inform the ecosystem classification and the mapping of that. These are broadly based on IUCN Global Ecosystem Typology and SEEA classifications. And then we use that mapping layer to measure the extent in hectares of each of our ecosystem classifications. And that was then used to populate an extent account. Condition accounts for each of the ecosystem classes condition accounts were then developed for each of those classes based on specific metrics that were considered likely to indicate ecosystem health. This was very much based on the field survey work carried out by Vishnu and his team, along with surveys by independent contractors and modelled metrics. We also developed thematic biodiversity accounts. These were the thematic accounts are used to organise data around specific themes relevant to the project objectives that might not easily be quantified in a monetary sense. So, in regards to this project, the biodiversity outcome was important. Was one of the most important objectives. So we considered metrics for various animal and plant groups, including saltmarsh vegetation, fish, coastal birds, and mammals, including bats. Biodiversity accounts were developed based on the listed species under the TSPA and EPBC Acts. And finally, supply and use accounts were developed. These focused on the three main ecosystem services that were considered most relevant to the restoration site. These were essentially the fish nursery provisioning services, the global climate regulation services, or carbon sequestration of the site, being a blue carbon site, and then the recreational related services that the site potentially offered, which were considered to be bird watching opportunities. So various measures were used to quantify each of these services. For the fish nursery services, Vishnu's fish catch data and biomass estimates were used as the sort of as the metric. For carbon, as part of our contractual requirements from the federal government, we were required to use the Blue Cam model, which was essentially developed to inform the carbon offset or ACU scheme. And so it wasn't essentially developed for this purpose, but we were requested to sort of test it against this sort of application. And then for bird watching, we developed user surveys along with expertise from UTAS, and they applied travel cost modelling approaches to quantify the value of recreational bird watching at the site, or the potential value. Where beneficiaries could be easily identified, downstream beneficiaries, that is, we then also developed monetary supply and use accounts. So in this case, it was using existing carbon market values, and we're also considering alternative measures of carbon value as well. And as I said, the travel cost modelling approach for valuing the recreational bird watching. So where's the project up to? Essentially, as Vishnu's already mentioned, the pre-restoration surveys have allowed us to populate the opening or pre-restoration side of the accounts. So that is complete. Post-restoration surveys are pretty much complete now, and that data will be used to integrated into the closing side of the accounts, so we will have an idea of change across in response to the restoration activities. The birdwatching surveys are nearing completion, as are the sort of finalised carbon and recreational valuations. And the final accounts and accompanying reports will be submitted to Q in June of this year. So it's all action stations at the moment. We've got some sort of early key learnings that I'll briefly touch on. Essentially, one of the obvious ones is the time frame of the project. In reality, the 2-year timescale of the project means that any detection of meaningful response to restoration is obviously minimal, and ideally the time frame that you would open and close or compare accounts across would be sort of ecologically meaningful to your restoration approach. Deriving single metrics and condition from ecological data isn't always easy or meaningful. Defining and identifying an end beneficiary is often difficult. In this context, identifying exactly who the downstream beneficiaries of nursery fish, for instance, is quite difficult, be that recreational users or the commercial sector. Defining meaningful project and ecosystem boundaries again is difficult. Essentially, aligning those with ecologically meaningful boundaries is challenging. And a good design, account, and development needs to be based on good prior expertise of and understanding of the site. And lastly, estimating carbon with existing modelling approaches has limitations, and there's perhaps more ground or field-based approaches that are more appropriate. But I don't want to finish on a negative. The positive outcomes of the project have been that we've been able to develop a robust baseline account from which future EEA can hopefully develop. 5, 10, 20 years into the future. The data has been provided for the use of decision making into the future at this site and similar projects. We've clearly identified a lot of limitations and the various costs associated with some of these approaches, which we will be making clear comments and recommendations around in the final report. And hopefully we've been able to estimate natural capital value for these types of projects, which will guide future and current proponents with their future business activities and how they go about securing investment. I'd just like to acknowledge that this has been very much a collaborative project with a lot of involved project partners. Particular acknowledgement and thanks goes out to Dr. Vishnu Prahalad and his team at School of Geography at UTAS. Obviously, Jen and the NRM South team, Professor Darla Hatton MacDonald at the UTAS School of Business and Economics, and Dr. Paul Carnell and his group at RMIT. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matt. I'm conscious we just have another minute left. And I thank again Matt and Vishnu for their presentations. We have been responding to some of your questions in the chat, so I hope that you've been able to see those. But there were just 2 that I wanted to return to that we haven't responded to. Amy asked about referral under the EPBC Act. That was certainly something that we had to discuss in the permits that we received to do this project. It was considered by council that because this was a restoration activity that we didn't require referral to the EPBC Act, even though Temperate Saltmarsh Ecological Community is listed as a threatened ecological community. But they, as I mentioned, they always reserve the right for further referral should they deem it necessary. So no, it wasn't referred is the short answer there. Matt, I hope you had a chance to catch your breath. A question came through from Kat around the registering the project, given that there was I'll elaborate on that, registering the project with the Clean Energy Regulator using the tidal restoration method, given that there was that breach, how would that have impacted registration? My understanding is that the breach did not return normal hydrological flow to the system, but I just wondered if you wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I think early discussions around whether the project was eligible, that was certainly a concern, and I think if it if it progressed further in that respect, yeah, certainly you'd want to get clear communication from the regulator. But yes, I think that was where we settled. That, given that it wasn't full restoration, and essentially the landholder could have gone back and easily repaired the breach, and hence, you know, it wasn't a full restoration. But yeah, that was certainly a consideration.
Thank you. All right, we are over time. I would like to thank everybody very much for participating today and coming along and hearing our story about what we've been able to achieve. You're very welcome to contact us about this project at any time. We will be making this recording available on our website too, should you ever want to refer to it again or refer somebody else to it. Yeah, so thanks again, and I wish you all a very wonderful afternoon. And I'm about to head out to the project site now, which makes me very happy. So thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.